Welcome to Somerset Showcase. Today we are going to be talking a little bit about the area's Native American history as we discuss a project that involves designating an area as a heritage trail. And we are here with Dave Weed, who is the coordinator of that effort, and John Larsen, who is a past president of the Somerset Historical Society and the current treasurer. So, first of all, can you tell me what a heritage trail is?
Well, heritage areas, there's 62 of them across the country. The closest one to this location is the Blackstone Valley Heritage Corridor, which was the second one that started in the country over 30 years ago. And heritage areas are places that are designated by Congress and then promoted by the National Park System to reveal particular histories of a region that might otherwise not be known. So unlike places, national parks, heritage areas are not owned by or run by the National Park System. They're simply designated as a place of interest. And people can find them because they're publicized on national maps and websites and things of that sort. But once people come into a heritage area, they learn about the history and what makes that area unique, but they also learn about the other resources in the area. So it's a terrific way to promote any region of the country and to not only inform people who live there, who may not be aware of their own history, but also people from around the region, around the country, and now around the world, because there's a lot of interest on the part of people in Europe and other parts of the world in what happened here 400 years ago. So this is a way for people to find out more information about that.
Now, I know Somerset is part of this area. Can you tell me the other towns that are in the area, or where does this town?
Part of Providence, east of which river is it?
The Moshassuck River?
The Moshassuck River, East Providence, Barrington, Warren, Bristol. Did I say East Providence?
Yep.
Seekonk, Rehoboth, Swansea, and Somerset. And it's all the historic area where the Pokanoket tribe, it's their homeland. And it's one of the things that about making a heritage area, I know that I lived here much of my life. I moved away, came back. When I left here, we were called the Gateway to the Cape. Then we tried branding ourselves as South Coast. I don't see where Somerset, Swansea, this area is really South Coast, Massachusetts. I think that branding it with the Sowams Heritage Area would give us an identification and will also give us a reason to come to the area.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about the history of the Pokanots in the area and this heritage area?
Right. The Pokanoket were the people that allied with the English that arrived at Plymouth Colony, and their Massasoit Osequum, which is yellow feather, was made the...
Well, it was really the first treaty.
the first treaty.
Yeah.
And it lasted over 50 years until King Philip's War. And King Philip's War basically set the table for how Native Americans would be treated after that. After King Philip's War, the members of the tribe either went into hiding, they were sold into slavery, or they had been killed. When the Pilgrims arrived, Osequum could raise 300 warriors. Before the disease that killed the natives before the Pilgrims arrived, he could amass 3,000 warriors. So he lost 90% of his force, or his troops, or whatever you want to call them. So when the Pilgrims arrived, the Narragansetts in Rhode Island were pretty powerful, and they were pushing into his land. So he saw the technology. Let's make a treaty. It's going to be beneficial to both of us. We will say none of the people that I am associated with will attack you, and you will protect us. So it was a mutually beneficial arrangement initially, but due to misunderstandings, it eventually fell apart.
And Somerset's connection to all this, didn't this kind of have to do with how Somerset, or part of it at least related to how Somerset broke off from Swansea?
Well, after the war, they sold off the land that became Somerset to pay the war debt from King Philip's War. So at the Historical Society, and also in Mary Ann MacDonald's book, there is a map showing the original purchasers of, I think it's called Shawamet.
Yeah.
And it's eventually Somerset did break off from Swansea in 1790. It's a different story. I think also part of this heritage area is going to talk about Native Americans, but there's also going to be, speaking of Roger Williams and religious freedom, there's going to be talk of the slave trade and what that did in the area. There are a number of people got quite rich in the slave trade. In Somerset, we have the Quaker Meeting House, which back when they built it in 1701, being a Quaker could get you run out of Massachusetts, could possibly get you killed. And as I understand it, the meeting house was close enough to Rhode Island that they could either flee, or they could say, well, we're really in Rhode Island, we're not in Massachusetts. So the Quaker Meeting House in Somerset, I think, would definitely be part of what we're looking at. And also,
We had a very well-known abolitionist.
yes, Patience Brayton, who worked to get all the Quakers in Somerset to free their slaves, and then she went on a quest throughout the colonies and spoke at different meeting houses, went to the South. I believe Mary Ann MacDonald would know this better than I, but I believe she was getting ready to go into Georgia. She had a guide, and the guide said, I'm not going into Georgia with you, because these people aren't going to take this, what you're saying, very well. And she basically said, okay, I'll go by myself. And she shamed him into coming with her. So she was quite a lady who was very important, one of the earliest abolitionists.
And this is a good example. I live in Warren, just a few miles away from Somerset, and I've just learned this history. And I think that's what heritage areas can do, is reveal history that people in a certain area may be familiar with, but people around the area do not know. So this is a way of telling that story. And
I think sometimes people don't know why the Quaker building there is named the Swansea Friends Meeting House rather than
It was built
because it's in Somerset, because it was built before. And then I wonder how many people at Shawmut Gardens know the meaning behind Shawmut.
Yeah, right, that's true. And there's also in Somerset, down at Slade's Ferry, at the Historical Society, we have documentation. I believe it's Peleg Sherman is petitioning the town of Swansea, which we were still part of Swansea and during the Revolution, for money because he had troops at Slade's Ferry for the Revolutionary War guarding the area, and he was trying to get reimbursed for the provisions. So we have a petition there from him to the town of Swansea. So,
and the Historical Society is a great repository of a lot of this history, including a great deal of Native American artifacts that have been on display there. And Yet it's a museum that I only went there for the first time last fall, that more people should know about.
Yeah, it's a nice local museum.
It is.
They have
And
quite a bit in there.
It's one of 4 small local museums in Sowams. And without a heritage area, people aren't going to find out about these. There's the Carpenter Museum up in Rehoboth.
Yeah.
Not many people have been there. You know, it's not the easiest place to find, but once you get there, you find all kinds of things that you might not have known about. There's a museum in East Providence at Hunts Mills, terrific museum, but again, it's not well known, even in the town of East Providence, the city of East Providence. And then we have a small museum in Warren in the library that has on display a number of items from there. And Bristol has a small museum as well. So 4 museums in addition to the one here in Somerset. So that's 5 museums that get very little attention because they're not connected, they're not part of a larger story. And that's what we aim to do in creating a heritage area.
So where are you in the process of doing that?
We are halfway through a feasibility study. We were fortunate to get some funding from the National Trust for Historic Preservation and then hire a consultant team of 3 people, probably the best consultants in the country in this, who have been working with us. They came a year ago for a visit, and they'll be back again in October, and we'll talk about that. But they have put together a 90-page study of this, and then are in the process of completing the feasibility study, which will probably go to the National Park System sometime next summer. And in the process, we'll be petitioning Congress to accept this as a National Heritage Area. Comes with some funding, about $500,000 a year, and that's now guaranteed for 15 years. So it's not an expensive project from the federal government point of view. That they run all 64 of these places on about $25 million a year, which is nothing in the federal budget. But it does give a national prominence to all of these areas.
What will that money be used for, about $500,000?
You can
Like signs?
hire a few staff people. We're talking about the possibility of having a visitor center, so people can come and learn about what's in the area. And a lot of heritage areas use that money for small grants that they give out to local museums and other projects in the area. So it's not huge dollar amounts, but it's enough to make a big difference.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the grants require a match,
Yeah.
a dollar for dollar match.
Right.
So in general, I think that the federal government makes a small investment, they get a match, and often there's more than the match involved. So it is very cost effective for the federal government, and the area I think may be obvious, but it would hopefully make a local draw for tourism, and we get more people visiting here. That's better. I know that last night in the selectmen's meeting, they were talking a lot about what they want to do to bring people in.
Yeah.
I think that the designation of us as a heritage area, being included in a heritage area, would do nothing but help create the draw into Somerset and the area.
So would all these towns have to provide the matching funds for this?
Well,
Is that-
matching can be done in a number of ways. Part of it can be a portion of budgets of the existing resources in the area, but a lot of heritage areas count volunteer time. The federal government equates every hour of volunteer time to $28. And I know the Blackstone Heritage Area, which has a very sophisticated system where they keep track of the volunteer people in over 25 programs in the area. So they keep statistics on how many hours people put in. You multiply those thousands of hours by $28 and you come up with a match.
Okay.
And I know for a fact that's true because years ago I was involved with Trout Unlimited of Northern Rhode Island, and they had us sign in every meeting, and we were there for an hour and a half. There'd be 20 people there, times an hour or hour and a half. You've got 30 hours of volunteer time. So it was they even included meetings. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's any
so-
volunteer time.
right. So that is a
So it's a way of encouraging
Right.
volunteers as well, and getting people involved, because the whole system is designed to be locally owned and operated. That this is not run by the national park system. This is run by local people. You get a certain amount of money as kind of seed money, but from there you grow the organization with the resources that you identify through starting a system that encourages growth.
Okay.
And one of the first things I wanted to know when I was asked on board and asked to get onto this project was, would the Somerset Historical Society lose any autonomy? And the answer is no. There is absolutely no federal involvement
Right.
in telling us how to run the museum or when we have to be open, or there's nothing like that. So once I heard that, I knew that I wanted to be on board with this project, because I just think for the area it's important. I think there's an important history that we need to tell. There's a number of people, if you go outside of this area, and I think even in this area, I think there's a lot of people that don't even know about King Philip's War.
Yeah.
Right.
And especially once you move out of New England, because it was a terrible war that was very bloody and very costly.
And most people have heard of the Wampanoags, but that's because that federation, which only started in 1927 out of Mashpee on the Cape, has done a good job of marketing and telling people about the tribe, but people hear very little about the Pokanokets. We work with the Pokanoket tribe. They're centered in this area. They have about 300 members, and they have gatherings. We do an annual Heritage Day at Burrs Hill Park, the same place where Usamequin was reburied in 2017. That's how I got started in all this. He was in a grave there in the park for years, and then people were looting the grave, so Charles Carr, the town librarian in 1913, got possession of the area there and exhumed 42 grave sites. So all of that's been reinterred, along with what we believe is there's good evidence that Usamequin, the great Massasoit, is among them, and he's been reburied there.
I remember learning about him, and it was always the Wampanoags when I was in elementary school many years ago.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what they teach today, but
Well, it's understanding that every tribe has their own perspective on things, and we very much will be respecting those differences as we put this project together. Each tribe tells the story a little differently. That's fine, and we're going to give plenty of room for them to tell that story. But what's really clear is that this area, Sowams, was the historic location, and the treaty with the English, that was all part of it.
I mean, the Taunton River must have a history as far as the Native Americans go.
Right. Actually, in the museum, we have we have artifacts from two digs that were taken from across the river in Freetown, from Peacehaven and Bear Swamp. The notes that Roy Athern took, his collection is housed at the Historical Society. At the time in the 1980s, it was considered probably to be the biggest private collection in Massachusetts. and he donated his collection to the Historical Society. The amazing thing to me is the notes that he took. If you look at the artifacts we have there, all of them have a number. We also have 13 or 14 notebooks going back from the 1920s all the way into the 1980s. He started collecting when he was a child, I believe. And if you reference the number and you go to the proper book, you can see where he found it or where he acquired it. He bought a number of collections too. I know he bought a collection from somebody named French that was from Bristol. He also bought collections from Ohio, Alabama, Montana. So you can go into the book and say, oh, this is part of the French collection that was collected down in Rhode Island. And he details what everything is. This is an arrowhead made of whatever, more than I know as of now. And it was used for, birds. There's bird points, which are little points on arrows, and then there's larger ones. And
I should have had you bring some props.
I stopped. I thought about bringing the mortar. We have a mortar and pestle at the museum that it was found at Pierce's Beach, and that would have been used for grinding corn or herbs. Part of the three sisters, corn, squash, and beans that the Pokanokets taught the English how to plant to help them survive. And the corn would dry, and then they would grind it up in a mortar and pestle and use it for meal. So, and I should have brought that.
But people can see all this and a lot more at the Somerset Historical
That is
Society
correct.
at 274 High Street in Somerset.
Yes.
And your hours are when?
Saturday 9 to 12 right now. We're hoping to add Thursdays from 6 to 8 soon. So we'll let you know. If you check Facebook out, we'll let you know when that happens.
And that's a good point. We don't have to wait to be designated as a National Heritage Area for people to learn about and enjoy the resources that we have around here. So we encourage people, if you're interested now, get started now. There's a website that I've put together called SowamsHeritageArea.org, and that website has over 600 pages of all kinds of things from regarding the 17th century and the locations, places like the museum are described in there. So people can get a good sense of what's here to be found. But over 50 locations still around from the 17th century, and people walk and drive by them every day and have no idea what's right in front of them. So that's what's important about a project like this.
Now, you're going to have some public meetings
Yes, we
related
are.
to this. Can you tell me about those?
Well, the consultants I mentioned before are coming back and want to describe Heritage Area and how they work, and answer questions about what it would mean around here. So we're doing two in this area. One will be at the White Church, the Congregational Church on Route 6 in 195. If people are familiar with that, I know people attend a lot of meetings there. That will be on Tuesday, October 17th at 3 in the afternoon. So if people are able to get out during the day or leave their place of employment to come, they can listen there. The next day at 7 in the evening, we're doing one at Hope and Main, which is right in the center of Warren. There are maps and information about this. People can go either to SowamsHeritageArea.org, or we've simplified it, and we now have a new URL that's just Sowams, SOWAMS.org. Easy to remember, Sowams.org, and that takes you right to information, and people can even sign up on Eventbrite if they'd like to reserve a place at one of the meetings. So.
And also on that site is a link to the page you mentioned with over with all the, what, 600 pages?
Yeah,
600
approximately.
pages about, of information on the area, 17th century.
Now, in the past, I've done some stories on historic districts, and when these things come up, I think people worry that it's going to put limits on what they can do on their properties. Does this do anything like that, or does
Not at all.
does it help you preserve certain areas?
That's one of the things that consultants will definitely bear down on. And it's been a struggle around the country, because when you mention the federal government, there are many places in the country that aren't particularly happy about the federal government. And what we have to make abundantly clear is that it has nothing to do with changing any rules, regulations, any zoning, anything of that sort. It's simply a designation of an area. It says this is an important area, here's what's here. That's all it does. So if people want to tear something down or build something up, they're still subject to the rules that are in place now, but it doesn't add anything to restrictions or rules or anything of that sort.
Okay.
It's not a national park. It's a national heritage area. Very different.
So, what are going to be the biggest benefits of having this?
Well, they've done all kinds of studies and shown literally millions of dollars in revenue that have come in. These are studies of existing heritage areas across the country. And they've taken a look at the economy of the area before the heritage area, and then looked 5 and 10 and 15 years afterwards. And they clearly demonstrate a growth in the area. It's not just tourism. People think, well, is this going to bring in hordes of tourists? That's not the intention here. It's really giving an identity to an area. And that has a lot to do with the quality of life for people there. Employers consider quality of life issues greatly. You know, how good are the schools? What are the roads like? What's the transportation like in your area? And what's the local sense of pride in an area? That has a lot to do with attracting people to come and want to work in an area. So employers are always looking for those kinds of quality of life indicators, and heritage areas have clearly demonstrated this. If you go on the National Heritage Area website for the National Park System, they will take you to a link that will you can examine all the studies that have been done on this. So it's nothing but positives.
Because I know you said you've met with the Economic Development Committee chair and the town administrator.
Yeah, right. We wanted all the people in town that had an interest, would have an interest, such as the selectmen, the town administrator, economic development chair, to know that this was happening, because after people watch this, they may go up to a selectman or Paul Cogley and ask them about it, or Mark Iucci, and we did not want them to be blindsided. So I would feel like if I was in their position and something was going on like this, I'd want to know about it. So that's why we reached out. And as Dave was referencing earlier about the areas and pride in the community, I think something you had mentioned before, the Blackstone Heritage Corridor, when that was first formed, the Blackstone River was one of the most polluted rivers in the US, and there wasn't a lot of pride in the area. But as you mentioned recently, there's a number of businesses now that call themselves Blackstone Plumbing or whatever. So it has taken an area that was somewhat downtrodden and didn't have a lot of pride in their community. Now there's pride that, you know, we're in the Blackstone Heritage Corridor. There's businesses that are using that name when before it was like poison. So
I don't think Somerset.
No, I don't think we're in that position either.
Has to
But I think that
but
goes towards the pride in the community,
Right.
and the.
I think the Taunton River is in much better condition, they say, than it used to be.
Yeah, and it
yes,
was never as
yeah.
bad as the Blackstone River.
Yes. And we've gotten some financial support from the Taunton River Watershed Council for this project. They're very much in favor of this. We've also gotten support from the National Parks Conservation Association. So There are a lot of people behind this. We are not the only heritage area applicant that's currently working on this. There are at least 4 others around the country that are also going through this process. So there's really no limit, I suppose, until the entire United States is full of heritage areas, there might be a limit. But the fact that so few people even know about the existence of heritage areas is an indication that there are not too many of them. And they tend to represent areas that have not had attention in the past. There's one in eastern Connecticut called the Last Green Valley. Have you ever heard of it? Neither had I. But you know, it kind of answers the question: what are you going to find in eastern Connecticut? And you get connected with them, and you find all the resources there. There's a lot of state parks and things of that sort. It's a way of bringing that all together.
Unfortunately, when I think of Connecticut, I think of casinos. So.
It's not part of
But
that.
that has a Native American connection
Well,
down there.
that's true, right. And there's a terrific museum, the Pequot Mashantucket Museum.
I've been there.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
fabulous.
It took a while to go
Best
through
in the
that.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good place. But that's not part of the heritage area there. So, you know, we may have other resources. You mentioned Blackstone. Before the Blackstone started, there was no history of the industrial revolution there. Now with Slater Mill, it's become a national park now, and they created the Museum of Work and Culture in Woonsocket. Hadn't existed before the heritage area. So that's an example of how the heritage area brought about the kinds of resources to bring yet a new place in that people could see. And I would love to see some kind of a museum in the Sowams area that brings the best of all these places in one place.
I mean, they're trying, and this has been an effort that's been going on for years, but they're trying to restore the Swansea Friends Meeting House. Could that help with getting grant money for that? Because
Absolutely.
It's a lot of money they're talking about to get that completely
This
restored.
very much helps that. The National Park System wants to know about any current heritage areas that have been designated historic places, but also those that are in the process of gaining that designation.
Well, it is a national historic.
It is already.
Yeah.
Now, whose idea was it to do this?
Well, I always point to a woman I met from Barrington who first came up with this idea about 8 or 9 years ago, and she said, you know, she was involved a lot in the land trusts, and she has a small business that consulted to land trusts, and she said, you know, after learning about this area and its history, its very unique history, and the fact that nobody seems to know about this, wouldn't it be terrific if we had a national heritage area for Sowams? And if you go on the SowamsHeritageArea.org website and look for videos, you will find a 4-minute video that she did back probably in 2015 or so.
Wow. So this has been in the works for a long time.
Oh yeah. Well, good ideas take a while. They have to percolate. You know?
Yeah, I think when they designated the Taunton River as a wild and scenic river,
Right.
I think that was quite a process as well. 'Cause that's a
20
federal
years.
designation.
20 years, right. And that involved, by the way, a lot of help from the Poconoket tribe. And I don't know if you know Gray Fox, who
That name is
sits on the
familiar.
board, he and his wife, Roger DeRosiers.
I do know him.
Yes,
Yes.
many people do.
They are very nice.
Yes, they're terrific folks, and they're Poconoket, and
Okay.
they have been very much involved, and that's another benefit we haven't touched on a great deal, and that's the environmental projects. There's lots of federal dollars coming in because of sea level rise to this area. There's something called the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program. They're sitting on millions of dollars of Department of the Interior money that's coming into this area to improve water and land quality in light of sea level rise. So that's something that heritage areas are very much interested in supporting. as are native tribes. They're very much concerned. That's always been their concern. Ever since the Europeans arrived here, who's taking care of the land? They feel a very strong obligation to do that, and are very much interested in finding the resources that are offered that can make that happen.
So this must have involved a lot of work, and you still have more to do.
I'm glad I retired just before I started this.
Do you have
Now
like
it's a full-time
you must
job.
have like a committee, and how many people are involved?
We have an 18-member steering committee, of which John is a member, and we have two town planners from towns in Rhode Island and 2 in Massachusetts. Both the Swansea town planner and the Seekonk town planner are on it.
Oh, John Hanson.
Yes, you know John. He's
He
very much
actually
involved.
lives in Somerset.
Yeah. Okay.
I always like my Somerset connections.
There you go. Right. Yeah. So, and we have a pastor from the Baptist Church in Swansea. That's the oldest Baptist church in Massachusetts, over on Route 6 there. He's retired now, but he was pastor of that and knows a lot of the history of that area. We have people who have been involved with the Blackstone project. We always are on the lookout for people who can help in certain areas. So someone doesn't have to be on the steering committee to be a part of this process. And if there are viewers who like to know more, you can email me at drweed@cox.net, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction so you can get connected with the project.
How far away are you from being able to get this designation? Do you know how much longer it's going to
Probably
take?
the earliest we could get Congress to fund this would be the end of this next congressional session, end of next year.
Well, that's not that far
It
away.
isn't that far away, but typically what Congress does, as they just did last December, they take 4 or 5 applicants together that are approved by the National Park System and put them through in one bill. So we may have to wait a year or two, even if we're approved.
And I believe also that the consultant said that they've seen it, what, a year and a half or 2 years, or 10 or more.
Right.
So there's no guarantees.
Right. There's no fast track on
No,
this.
it's
Right.
not something that happens overnight.
Have you been in touch with Congressman Auchincloss?
Oh yes, and we were just on the phone with the people from Senator Warren's office, and also Markey's office, and then the equivalents Reed and White House, and would have been Cicilline in Rhode Island, but he stepped down. But we're in touch with him at the Rhode Island Foundation as well, and we're waiting to see the outcome of the election in District 1 to see who our congressman in Rhode Island will be. So, film at November.
Okay, well, this has been very interesting. Thank you for letting us know, and I'm sure that there's probably not a lot of people who know about this
Right.
out here, and so this will be very informative.
This is your
to the
job, to
public.
tell people about
And,
things.
once again, the public meetings are October 17th, a Tuesday, at 3 o'clock at the White Church in Swansea, and at 7 o'clock on Wednesday the 18th at Hope and Main in Warren. So,
And that's all on sowams.org.
yeah.
You could,
Okay, we've been talking about a little bit of history today on the Somerset Showcase. We will see you next time.